Hello, welcome to WDH. If you're tired of AI generated slop and want the real human storytelling, please subscribe to support this channel. My name is Maria and I'll be your narrator. Let's get into the story now.
Ilara had always been a creature of the edges, edges of the village, edges of the forest, edges of life itself. After the untimely death of her husband in the unforgiving peaks of the Black Pine Hollow, she found herself alone, carrying both grief and necessity like a heavy clock. The villagers spoke in a hushed tone when they saw her. Some said she was cursed, others whispered that the forest had claimed her heart before it claimed her husband. But Elara cared little for their murmurs. Survival was her only companion now, and the bitter winter was approaching like a stalking predator. The snow had begun its slow descent that evening, each flake falling lazily, yet promising the suffocating weight of a storm. She trudged through the thin path winding between towering pines, their blackened needles whispering the secrets to one another in the icy wind. Her basket swung from her arm, rattling with the roots, dried herbs, and the fewer measured firewood logs she had managed to gather from the forest floor. Each step sank her ankle deep into snow drift that sprinkled like shreds of the glass, making every moment an exercise in the patience and exhaustion. A stillness pressed down over the forest, broken only by the occasional click of a distant branch or the crunch of her boots. But then came another sound, subtle, almost imperceptible. At first, a dry stab behind her. She froze, straining her ears. The snow muffled most sounds, yet that crack came again, closer this time, deliberate. Her heart stuttered. She told herself it was just a wandering fox, or perhaps a falling branch, but a creeping insect deep and devoured, whispered a truth she wasn't ready to face. Through the grey light of dust, she glimpsed movement, massive fluid, short, and they saw it. Through the grey light of the dust, she glimpsed movement, massive fluid, shadowed, and then she saw it. An enormous black bear, its coat glossy with the cold, a cruel scar etched across one very eye, emerging from the forest's dark heart. It did not lunge, it did not flee. It merely watched. Its gaze was heavy, measuring, calculating. It was as if the bear could see every fragment of her fear, every tremor of her resolve. Hilara's throat tightened. She wanted to run, but the snow betrayed her speed. Her mind scrambled for the logic, for a plan. Remembered the old stories, the villagers' warnings, and the dozen survival tactics she had never thought she would need. But this was no mere beast chasing prey. It was something older, wilder, and intelligent. It seemed to understand the precariousness of the moment, the fragility of a lone window in the deep winter woods. The lantern in her basket flickered weakly, threatening to extinguish. The forest seems to hold his breath, the pines leaning closer as if drawn by the silent tension. She knew that every step, every move might be her last. Yet within that fear, a strange clarity settled over her. She would not go down easily. If the forest, if the bear, if the shadows wanted a story, they would get one, but it would not be a story of surrender. And Lara tightened her grip on the basket and whispered to herself, not knowing if it was courage or madness flowing her. Not tonight. And then, from the heart of the trees, the first low rumble of the bear echoed, and the forest seems to grow darker still. Elara ran, each foot footfall, a muffled thump against the deep, powdery snow. The forest seemed alive with sound, the groan of the branches, weighted down by ice, the whisper of the needles brushing against one another, and always that low, steady thump of the bear behind her. It was not the haphazard pursuit of a predator. It was patient, intelligent, deliberate. Every snap of twig, every soft crunch of snow under its massive paws reminded her that escape was not a certainty. Her ankle throbbed, an old injury flaring with every desperate step. Snow clung to her skirts, soaking through the wool and chilling her to the bone. The basket had fallen in her panic, spilling its contents into the white silence, herbs, roots, tiny firewood logs, all scattered, forgotten, devoured by the forest vastness and her fear. Alaris glanced back for the briefest of the moment. The bear's eye, dark and unyielding, followed her every motion. It was close now, its massive silhouette moving with terrifying grace between the pines. She stumbled over a fallen root and nearly pitched forward, catching herself against a tree trunk. Her breath came in rage gasps, each exhale a visible puff of mist in the freezing air. Ahead she was the ruins of the old hunter's cabin, a skeletal remnant from a time she could barely remember. Its roof had collapsed years ago, windows gaped like hollow eyes, and the door hung crooked on its hinges. Desperation surged to her. This was her last chance. If she could make it there, she might find cover, or at least a way to show the bear down. Elaris reached the cabin and pressed herself against the broken wall, the cold biting through her shawls. She could see the bear now, fully erect on its hind legs, sniffing the air, scanning the ruins with an intelligence that sent the shivers down her spine. The snow around it was stained with the dark patches of old blood, or was it only the shadow? Alaris didn't dare think too closely. Her went instinctively to her late husband's knife, the small steel blade worn smooth from years of the use. It was no match for the brute in front of her, yet it was all she had. The bear roared, a sound that shattered the frozen silence and echoed through the hollow like a clap of the thunder. The force of it made Lara flinch, and for a moment she felt the icy fingers of the hopelessness wrapped around her. There was no way past, no chance to flee. The bear had anticipated every escape route, every feeble attempt. She was trapped, cornered beneath the dead oak, the forest pressing in around her like a living entity. And then, in the midst of her fear, something unusual happened. A light flickered between the distant trees, faint yet resolute, and shadow moved with a confidence that did not belong to any villager or traveler. The bear paused, ears twitching, and Elara squinted, trying to make sense of it. Could this be her hunter, someone who could might save her, or was it yet another danger, one she could not yet see? Her heart battered and exhausted, still dared to hope, and as the figure drew closer, carrying what looked like a burning branch and moving with the silent purpose, Elara realized that the night was about to change. The predator had not yet made its final move, and perhaps, yet perhaps, salvation was stepping out of the shadow. The figure emerged from the shadowed forest like a ghost carved from the flame and ice. Elara could barely make out his features beneath the hood, but there was not something in his gait, calm and precise, impossibly confident, that made the air around him seem to shift. He carried a burning branch in one hand, and its ember glow slicing through the darkness, casting long, flickering shadows across the snow. In the other, he held a horn, old and scared, the faint marking of the hunters long gone etched into its surface. The bear's roar shattered the brittle silence one more, but this time it hesitated ears swivelingly, its dark eye fixed on the stranger. The forest seems to pause, every snow-laden branch frozen mid-sway, every whisper of the wind suspended. Elara realized with a shiver that this man did not come to fight the bear in the unconventional sense. He did not raise the horn, did not shout, did not aim a weapon. Instead, he simply walked forward step by deliberate step and spoke. His voice was low, calm, almost hypnotic. The bear froze, tittling its massive head. Listening, there was no anger, no threat, only an unspoken understanding, a language older than any human tongue. Elara had her breath, too stunned to move. The beast, once relentless, now shifted uneasily, muscles tensing and relaxing as though whistling with some inner command. Behind the ruins, the faint, high pitched cry of the trapped echoed through the night. Elara's eyes widened as she realized what had drawn the bear into the woods. Not her presence, not her fear, but something smaller, weaker, and helpless. A cub trapped beneath the fallen timbers, its tiny body shivering violently in the cold. The bear's eyes flickered towards the sound, anguish softening the fierceness in its gaze. The stranger did not attack. Instead, he raised the burning branch, eliminating the cub, and stepped between the bear and its trapped offspring. For a tensed heartbeat, Elara feared the bear would strike, but it did not. It growled, low and guttural, but held back, restrained by some unseen bond, some wordless promise whispered into the night air. Clara felt something stir in her, a reckless, desperate courage. She could not remain passive while the cub suffered. Clutching her husband's knife, she crawled through the snow, every inch a battle against fear and gravity. When she reached the fallen timbers, she wedged the blade beneath the splintered wood and lifted it enough for the cub to scramble free. Its tiny, trembling body pressed against her chest, a fragile heartbeat against her own. The bear roared, not in anger but in recognition. The night seemed to exhale, and for one breathless, magical instant, widow, bear, and stranger stood together beneath the frozen pines. The snow around them glittered like the shattered stars, and the world felt suspended between reality and something older, wider, and inexplicable. Then, as suddenly as he appeared, the stranger took a step back, his face still shadowed beneath the hood. He did not speak, did not acknowledge her. The bear nudged its cub towards the forest and disappeared into the darkness, leaving the night quieter than it had ever been. Elara wanted to call after the stranger to thank him, to understand, but the words froze on her lips. Something about him felt impossible, and in that impossibility, she sensed the truth. The forest had delivered not just a savior, but a revelation, a man who should not exist standing between life and death, rewriting the rules of the night itself. The forest fell impossibly still after the bear, and its cub vanished into the dark embrace of the pines. Elara stood trembling. The tiny creature pressed against her chest, her breathing forming icy clouds in the frigid night air. The weight of what had just transpired pressed down on her like the snow-laden branches, heavy, surreal, impossible to fully grasp. She wanted to speak, to thank the stranger who had saved her life. But when she turned, he was already retreating the shadow, melting into the shadow, moving with the fluidity that defied the reason. Driven by instinct and desperation, she ran after him. Her ankle throbbed. Snow soaked her skirts and her lungs burned, but something, some unable pull, drove her forward. She called his name, though she did not know, and the night swallowed her voice. When she finally caught up, only a silhouette remained, framed by the faint moonlight piercing the forest canopy. Then she saw him clearly. The hood had fallen back, and for the moment, the world title on its axis, the man's face, scared, weathered, but hauntingly familiar, stopped her in her tracks. It was impossible. It was her husband. Her husband's spot. Her husband dead. Her dead husband. Her mind reeled a tangle of grief, disbelief, and wonder. How could he be here? How could he have saved her? How could he have been standing between her and death if the years and tragedy that separated them were illusionist? His eyes met hers, and for one long moment recognized flashed a flicker of the love, pain, and the secrets unspoken. She stepped closer, voice shaking. You? How? He said nothing. Instead, he reached into his coat and held out her late husband knife, the very knife she had clutched like a talisman of survival. But now it's gleamed unnaturally. It's steel sharp and clean, and a single word was carved into its handle: live. Lara's heart skipped. It was just not a command, it was a message, a covenant, and a mystery all at once. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, to reach across the impossible chasm of the night. But before she could, he turned and walked into the forest silently as a shadow, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the distant crunch of the snow beneath his feet. The next morning, she turned the village, carrying the cub and the story that no one could believe. She told of the bear, the stranger, the impossible figure who had saved her, and how her husband, her very own lost husband, had appeared as if carved from legend and shadow. But the villagers only shook their heads. The old hunter's cabin, they said, had burned over years ago, leaving only ruins in the hollow. The man who had once lived there had died, saving a trapped bear cub, a memory fading into the folklore. Elara clutched the knife to her head. Elara clutched the knife to her chest, the word live gleaming in the morning sun. No one could see the truth, not really, but she did. She understood now that some forces in the world were older than the grief, more patient than death, and capable of bending the rules of life itself. She walked back to her small home on the edge of the forest, the cup safe in her arms, snow clunchingly, crunching softly beneath her feet. She would live because she had been given a second chance, a mysterious gift, and a secret she would carry forever. The forest had spoken, the bear had obeyed, and her husband had returned in a way no one could explain. Some nights when the wind rattled the trees just so, she swore. She could hear him whispering through the pines. A promise, a warning, a word of love, live, and she did.